Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Washington, President Kennedy addresses the Peace Corps. In Michigan, Senator Mansfield speaks out on Vietnam. In San Diego, Dr. King meets the press. 3 convicts escape the Rock, Lee Remick gets money for nothing, and the Mets take another beating. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
Everybody's planning to see Seattle's spectacular $100 million World's Fair.
So pack up your troubles and forget your cares. Pack up your family and head for the fair in Seattle.
Rocket ride to Mars in the breathtaking U.S. Science Pavilion. See the fabulous city of tomorrow in the gigantic, wall-less, pillarless Coliseum. Have fun with the happy-go-lucky crowd.
Pack up your family and head for the fair.
It's the big thrilling adventure of a lifetime. Opening April 21st to October 21st in Seattle.
On Sunday, Senator Mike Mansfield urged a review of U.S. policy in Southeast Asia. In a commencement address at Michigan State University, the Democratic senator said, quote, "The present course is at best a course of marking time, of years and decades of immense cost to the people of the United States. At worst, it's a collision course. It is clearly in the interests of this nation to adjust that course if at all possible, and to do so with honor and decency," unquote. Mr. Mansfield, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said the U.S. had sunk $3 billion into war-torn Laos and Vietnam over the past 10 years with no substantial results. Regarding South Vietnam, the Montana senator said, quote, "After years of enormous expenditures, South Vietnam is more rather than less dependent on the U.S., unquote. At his press conference yesterday, President Kennedy was asked about the senator's suggestion of a policy review in order to avoid a marking time course or a collision course.
Well, we've been reviewing it, and as you know, we've been attempting in the case of Laos to work out a policy which would prevent either one of those situations. Whether we shall be successful or not, only time will tell. I know that we have put large sums of money. The situation there is still hazardous. What is true there, of course, is true all around the world. This is a period of great tension and change. But if the United States had not played a part in Southeast Asia for many years, I think the whole map of Southeast Asia would be different. I am delighted, as you know, I have the highest regard for Senator Mansfield, and I think we should constantly review. And I think, as he suggested, we should make judgments between what is essential to our interest and what is marginal. And I'm sure I know Senator Mansfield does not think we should withdraw, because a withdrawal, in the case of Vietnam, might mean a collapse of the entire area.
In that area, casualties continue to mount. On Wednesday in South Vietnam, an American sergeant was killed and 2 Americans were wounded near the Laotian border when a Vietnamese patrol they were accompanying ran into a Viet Cong ambush. And in Saigon that evening, Americans learned once again that they are perpetual targets for assassination when someone tossed a homemade grenade into a cafe filled with U.S. servicemen. No one was killed, but several were injured. Saigon police later arrested an 18-year-old unemployed youth. On Tuesday morning, 3 Alcatraz convicts escaped the Rock, as the prison is sometimes called. It remains an open question if they made it to the mainland or drowned. On Wednesday, the FBI joined the extensive search for the men, which thus far has yielded no positive results. The convicts, who used spoons to dig their way out of their cells, are Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, all convicted bank robbers. Authorities believe the break was masterminded by Morris, an escape artist with an IQ of 133, indicating very superior intelligence. The convicts delayed discovery by placing dummy heads on their pillows, complete with human hair collected from the prison barbershop. The convicts apparently used a homemade raft to get off the island. Fred Wilkinson, assistant director of the federal prison system, flew out from Washington to investigate the breakout. Last night, Mr. Wilkinson told newsmen, quote, "The investigation so far leads me to believe definitely that these 3 men, each of whom I knew well from the Atlanta penitentiary, made it off the island, but never made it to shore. The tides and winds that night were strong. Only a trained athlete could make such a swim," unquote. He added that if the men are found dead, they did not escape. At least 20 convicts have tried to escape the prison since it opened in 1934, but none got off the island and survived. 6 were slain, 3 were drowned, and the rest were captured. Prison officials acknowledged the fact that Tuesday's escape had been aided by structural erosion, stemming largely from the prison's exposure to salt spray. The escape has renewed interest at the Justice Department in closing Alcatraz, since modernizing and improving it would cost roughly $5 million. In San Diego today, Dr. Martin Luther King said that President Kennedy should, quote, be as concerned with the high cost of prejudice as he is with the high cost of steel, unquote. Dr. King added, quote, I think the president is a man of goodwill, but I feel he could do more in the line of moral persuasion. He has retreated on civil rights legislation he promised, unquote. The minister's trip is part of a nationwide drive to encourage Negroes to register and vote in the November elections. Dr. King was asked if he expected continued efforts to block Negroes from voting.
Yes, we still have a great deal of opposition. All types of conniving methods are still being used, such as complex literacy tests, intimidation and threats, and in some instances, economic reprisals are taken out against Negroes who seek to register and to vote. And I'm sure that the Justice Department will have to be vigilant and work with determination to end this if we are going to be successful.
In light of the fact that virtually all the Jim Crow politicians are Democrats, Dr. King was asked if Republican efforts to win the Negro vote might be successful.
I think it will depend on the sincerity of the Republican Party, and I think from now on in, Negro voters will be much more concerned about sincere deliverance rather than promises that are never implemented. If the Republican Party will make its intentions clear and stand up on them, I'm sure that Negroes will vote the Republican ticket just as the Democratic ticket. I don't think either party can boast of having the Negro vote in its vest pocket.
Finally, Dr. King commented on a recent statement Malcolm X made at a Nation of Islam meeting in Los Angeles regarding a plane crash on June 3rd that killed 130 people, including over 100 from Atlanta. Mr. X said, quote, I would like to announce a very beautiful thing that happened. I got a wire from God today. He dropped an airplane out of the sky with over 120 white people on it. We will continue to pray, and we hope that every day another plane falls out of the sky, unquote. An undercover police agent made a recording of Mr. X's remarks, which Los Angeles Mayor Sam Yorty then played at a press conference, adding, quote, it shows the distorted type of mind this fiend has, unquote. Today, Dr. King said, quote, Atlanta is my hometown. I knew many of the people who were killed. Many of them believed in progress. Some were to have attended a concert just last week at which Harry Belafonte sang. If the Muslim leader said that, I would certainly disagree with him, unquote. I'll have more news for you after this message.
Get yourself a lark, plenty of flash, lots of style and comfort, not much cash. Jazzy all around, loads of room in the back. Studebaker Lark, Sage of the Jack. What's got jazz, speed and spark? Zip, zoom, style, room, 62 Lark. Big car comfort, easy to park. You're gonna have a ball in the Lark, the 62 Lark.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
At the Chamber of Commerce in Washington Thursday, President Kennedy addressed Peace Corps staff and volunteers. It was the first anniversary of the initial selection of candidates to enter the Peace Corps.
I never thought I'd get such a warm hand in the Chamber of Commerce, and I don't think I ever will again. I wanted to come over here this morning to express my very great appreciation to you for all that you've done to make the Peace Corps such an important part of the life of America and the, though I hate to use this word, which we've inherited from other days, the image of America overseas. You remember in the Second World War, Winston Churchill made one of his speeches, I think, at Tripoli, when the Eighth Army marched in there, and said that they will say to you, what did you do during the Great War? And you'll be able to say that I marched with the Eighth Army. Well, they may ask you what you have done in the 60s for your country, and you will be able to say, I served in the Peace Corps, I served in the United States government. And I think that people will recognize that you have made your contribution. To be able to make a maximum effort to serve peace in a time of maximum danger, I would consider the most satisfactory of human experiences.
Following these remarks, Peace Corps Director Sergeant Shriver opened the floor for questions on any topic. The president was asked to justify the size of the budget allocated to the space program.
I think the United States cannot permit the Soviet Union to become dominant in the sea of space. There are many military implications to it, which are still yet unknown. The political and psychological effects are also serious. The amount of money that we're putting in, of course, is substantial, but it also will bring with it a good many industrial benefits, which we're only beginning to see. So I must say that the decision made by the administration to make a more determined effort in space is not merely to take some man to the moon, but rather to have the capability. The significance of Lindbergh's flight to Paris was not because he wanted to get to Paris, but because rather it demonstrated a competence in the field of air travel, which could have significance in after years. So it is with space.
Finally, a volunteer asked the president why this nation doesn't send food to Red China, now in the midst of one of the deadliest famines in history.
We do meet, as you know, with the Chinese communists in Warsaw at every 2 months intervals. There are some Americans, 2 Americans that I know about quite intimately, that are still imprisoned ever since 1951, who took part in the Korean War in Red China. One called Downey from Wallingford, Connecticut, the other Fecto from Lowell, Massachusetts. Both very young men, 21 or 2, and they're taken prisoner, and they're still there 10 years later. I think that the Chinese Communist regime has been extremely hostile to us and their propaganda and so on. I think that there's been no indication that they want the food. They have never asked us for it. And I must say that I think that it's only proper, given the problems that we do have, that at least some indication come from them before we decide what we should do.
The U.S. Atomic Energy Commission said today that a high-altitude nuclear test in the Pacific has been set for Monday. This week, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev expressed indignation over the U.S. tests, alleging that, quote, a certain element is preparing a surprise attack on the USSR by trying to attain the upper hand in the application of nuclear weapons, unquote. At his press conference yesterday, President Kennedy was asked about Mr. Khrushchev's allegation.
We are not preparing, if he is referring to us, I don't know who else he might be referring to, but the United States is not, quite obviously, has not been our policy. We made it quite clear what our policy is, which is to build for our own security. The United States has gone to great lengths, and as far as nuclear weapons, to secure effective means of control over their testing. The world knows the history of how this present series of tests began and our great reluctance to commence them. And I'm confident that if there is goodwill on both sides, that there can be a lessening of tensions. But there has to be goodwill on both sides.
Mr. Khrushchev's allegation of a planned surprise attack by the U.S. echoed remarks made by Fidel Castro on June 1st in Havana. Mr. Castro told British newsmen, quote, they are planning something. Of that we are sure. We are very grateful for the help we are getting from the Soviet Union. Where else are we going to get it? Unquote. As for President Kennedy's frequent charge that Cuba is trying to export her revolution, Mr. Castro said, quote, we are exporting only the example, unquote. On Monday, 20th Century Fox suspended production of Something's Gotta Give, a film from which the studio had fired Marilyn Monroe a few days earlier. The decision was made after Fox executives had failed to persuade Dean Martin to work with a replacement co-star, Lee Remick. Mr. Martin, whose contract gives him the right to approve his leading lady, had notified Fox that he would not resume work unless Miss Monroe was rehired. Mr. Martin told newsmen, quote, I have the greatest respect for Miss Lee Remick and her talent, but I signed to do the picture with Marilyn Monroe, and I will do it with no one else, unquote. Miss Remick's contract stipulates that even if the film was never made, which now appears likely, she is to be paid as though she had worked. Her reported fee for the film is $100,000. To date, her only work on the project has been to read the script and visit the studio once for wardrobe fittings. Today, Miss Remick's only comment on the controversy was, quote, I'm not mad at anyone. Sports, right after this.
For our youngsters to be able to design tomorrow's world, we'll need more and better college facilities. Help the college of your choice.
There's a new chant at the Polo Grounds these days, Let's Go Mets. Today, however, as on the vast majority of days this season, the Mets didn't go, but instead were thumped by the Cubs, a team nearly as bad. In the top of the second, after Chicago shortstop Andre Rogers doubled home Lou Brock, the Cubs starting pitcher Bob Anderson came to bat against Roger Craig, the Mets starter.
A high fly hit deep to left by Bob Anderson. Way back goes Thomas. Back to the bullpen. He reaches up. He can't make the play. Falls against the bullpen bench. Rogers in to score. Anderson is on his way to third, and he's then standing up at third with a booming triple hit deep, deep, deep to left field.
In what's already become an old story for the young club, the Mets, down 4 runs, tantalized the crowd with an apparent rally in the bottom of the 7th, loading the bases with 1 out. As the crowd roared, Let's Go Mets, Marv Throneberry, whose defensive blunders have earned him the nickname Marvelous Marv, was sent in by manager Casey Stengel to pinch hit for reliever Ken McKenzie.
And Diaz at third. Canilla running for Hodges at second. Joe Christopher at first.
He had called out on strike. He caught him looking.
So, with 2 away, it was up to right fielder Jim Hickman to play the hero.
There's a check swing ground ball down the first baseline. Fielded and by Girard, and he tags Hickman on the base path for the out. So, 3 hit. There were no errors and 3 men left.
The final score was 5-1, and with that result, the Cubs preserved their spot in 9th place, while the Mets remain firmly ensconced in the National League cellar. They now sport a record of 16 wins and 42 losses, 23.5 games behind the first-place Dodgers. As Casey Stengel said recently about his amazing Mets, quote, "This is not a team built for long winning streaks," unquote. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Friday, June 15th, 1962. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.